Hey guys, welcome to the I Hope to Hear This podcast. Jonathan, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
He came here under different pretenses.
Yup. Had no idea.
It's my daughter's birthday.
Yup.
It's her birthday tomorrow, but we're doing her birthday party on Saturday. And my wife, she wanted to do this huge decoration and all that kind of stuff. So just a few minutes ago, we were just downstairs blowing up balloons.
Yep.
And then we had some free time and said, hey, let's just record a podcast.
Now we're here.
Now we're here. And,
I love it.
I want to welcome you back because you were actually the very first guest on this podcast.
Was I?
Yeah.
The very first
The
one?
very first.
Man, I do remember doing that. I didn't know I was the first one.
Yeah. Up until...
Before Jim?
Before Jim.
Huh.
Yeah. Because it was at your house.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Back at the Battery.
Right.
Yep.
Because at that time, I didn't have any of this equipment. But you had all the sound equipment.
Yep.
So we just got together and did it. So yeah, thank you for coming here. What a full circle moment.
Yeah.
Wait, was it Jim or was it you? Now that you say that, I'm second guessing myself.
It's okay. We can forget about Jim. I'm just kidding. I want to say you did one with Jim first.
Let's see.
But maybe it was me. I don't know.
I forget the... Oh, wait. I hope no first chat. Okay, no. No, you were the first.
Oh.
Yeah, because I hope young men seeking romantic relationships here.
Oh my gosh, I remember that.
Episode 8.
I remember that.
You are the very first. Yeah, let me just... Yeah, dang. So the first 7 episodes, I kind of just recorded on my phone. Yeah. And then with you, it was the first time actually was with real equipment.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Good times. And I remember that literally just because the genesis of that episode was people were asking us about how we got married, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you get married, one of the first questions younger people ask is, how did you know she was the one, right?
Yeah.
You had one answer for Lois, and I had a somewhat different answer for Shirley. Yeah. And then we're like, hey, you just got to hash this out on the podcast. So, yeah, good times. Guys, go check that episode out. I think it still holds up. Episode 8. Yeah, episode 8.
I think I've done a couple of others with you as well. There was one with Zealand that I know we did. And then there was another one, I think.
There was another really random one where me and Justin Rambo.
That's right.
We went to your house.
Yep, I remember that as well.
And then I said, hey, this is a good conversation. I literally plopped down my phone in the middle, and then I started recording. Yeah, good times. So, just moments before we started recording, we were just sitting here in silence trying to think about what to talk about. And something that's been on my mind is this necessary? Is it necessary to figure out what to talk about? Because our podcasts, local podcasts like this, where, I do have people who are they have different perspectives because they have expertise in the field that they work in. But having these philosophical conversations, is it necessary?
Is the podcast necessary?
Yeah. So ultimately, is the podcast necessary?
It's the most meta thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Talk about if the podcast is necessary on a podcast.
Exactly. It's the only way I know how to do it.
So I was sharing just a little bit before we started recording this, but I think I was telling David, I think podcasts are very, very necessary. And I think there's 2 different audiences, right? There's the people who are listening, and then there's the people who are talking. And I think you're able to talk about things differently when you know it's in forum, and there's a different thought put into it. Even right now, right? My brain is, what would be valuable? What's actually important? That's not normally how I talk to people, right? If I'm talking to someone, I'm just speaking. But there's a different intentionality, I think, being behind the mic. And then for listeners, we have so many different ways to fill our time with entertainment, music, with a whole bunch of different things. But But I think podcasts are like a window into someone's mind, and just kind of like how books are, right? Books are a window into someone's mind, except someone really sat down and thought through what's the most important thing that I can share with someone and really codifying that. But there's something really raw and valuable about podcasting, I think, where you get to really see how people think, get to see what's important to them. And one of the reasons why I think this podcast is so amazing is because you do such a good job of pulling that out of people. Like, you are one of the best active listeners that I know, where, you'll hear something that someone said, you'll sit there and say like, oh, like that's really interesting. How can we dig a little bit deeper into that? And even when you put your insights in, it's always, in a way to dig deeper into people's thoughts. And so, yeah, I don't know. We could probably end the podcast right there. I think you should keep doing it. This is amazing.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I don't think the question was, should I stop or not? Because I definitely have fun doing it.
Yeah.
So, but I just want to understand, because, like, the age of this podcast, it's if it were a baby, it'd be in its third year. Like, we would have celebrated the second birthday, like
Yep.
the third year of life. And like, I start to think about, when it's just like my daughter, when you're a baby, there's not much but to survive, right?
Yeah.
Like, really, me and my wife, all we cared about was make sure the baby is alive, make sure that she doesn't get hurt. So like, I kind of treated this podcast the same way. Like, just make sure that it survives, make sure that it's doing something, make sure that I'm outputting something weekly. But then now that it's getting older, and like, I care less about releasing stuff weekly. If there are weeks where I don't have much to say, or I can't think of some cool guest to have on, then I'm fine with just kind of being like, okay. But then the flip side of that is, I really want to understand and have kind of a purpose, maybe even a goal behind the podcast. And honestly, I'm having a hard time, because the inception of the podcast was so kind of off the cuff. Like, oh, I'm bored, I want to try something. And at the time, like, I was really into like all the local podcasts, like KTL podcast, like the Growing Family podcast. I really, good.
That's a good podcast.
Yeah. So, it's like, I think I wanted to replicate something like that, and just continue it. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, all three of our podcasts are very different styles and different, but I loved being able to listen to like local people like I've like run into. I loved being able to hear their thoughts on a long form.
Yeah.
That I wanted to carry it on. But beyond that, I don't really have much of a purpose. Like, I know like the focus is on like Asian American stories and kind of normalizing the Asian American culture in Atlanta. Maybe even trying to figure out the Atlanta Asian American identity, right? Because I think Atlanta is a relatively new city for Asian Americans.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at like LA, Chicago, New York, even like Seattle, possibly even like Houston, like Texas. Yeah. I think the presence of Asian Americans has a longer history, right? But Georgia, Atlanta doesn't really.
Yeah.
So like, that's been kind of the driving force. Like, hey, let's get some Asian American stories out there, and also like get local people so that like people who are just acquaintances can learn about each other. But a vision or enough to be a goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's things that we've got to think through as far as like who do we want to speak to, right? And what impact do we want to have? And if we want to speak to, let's say, Asian Americans, and the impact we want to have is just them being able to hear other people who are living lives just as they are in Atlanta, and like, we're all making our own way. Like, I think there's something special about that. And I don't think anyone can ever tell anybody something is a big enough vision or a small enough vision, clear enough vision, vague enough vision, any of that stuff. Really, all that matters is what you have. And I think it's great that you're thinking about it, right? I think it's great that there's a level of intentionality saying like, wow, there's a platform that's been built now, and there's people that listen. What can we really leverage this for? And not leverage in like a manipulative way, but like, man, like when people listen, like, and you have a voice, like there's almost a responsibility of how to steward that voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's a good. I'm glad you said that, because another thing I've been thinking is, we in our generation we talk about like finding our voice and like getting our voice out there and things like that, but that's something our parents' generation never really cared about.
Right.
Right. It was about much more about survival, and they could care less if their voice was heard or not. Like they just wanted to figure out a way to be part of society and just kind of blend in. And so like I've come to a point where there was a phase in my life where almost anything from our parents' culture was bad, and like we needed to escape it and then like carve our own path. But I'm at a point, it might be because of my life stage, I'm not sure what triggered it, but I'm at a point where I'm like, well, wait a minute, there were some good things about our parents' culture that I think I would like to retain.
Yeah.
And so I'm literally going through everything, kind of like questioning everything. Like, how we say the Eastern culture is more of like, think about the collective before the individual. But then like, we've been taught like more about the individual, like expression and all that kind of stuff. I'm actually going back to that. I'm thinking there is a part of me that thinks like thinking about the collective is better, more important, more productive.
I think so. One of the things my dad always said when I was growing up is, you are 100% Korean and you're 100% American. And I actually think Esther, I forget what it was. It was on some news outlet or something. She said something very similar. But I think that's a very healthy way of looking at it. Like, there's no part of me that is not Korean. There's no part of me that's not American. I am Korean. I am American. Yeah, if I went to Korea, I'd stick out like a sore thumb. Yeah, even when I'm in America, it might not look like the average normal American. But both of those are fully a part of who I am. And I think, especially as second-gen Asian Americans, we have such a unique perspective and a unique just ability to manage both of those. And a lot of us, we fall one way or the other. We just go extreme one way or the other. But I think the beauty is if you're able to really own both sides. Because if you really think about it, like your daughter, right? She's going to be third. No matter how much we're going to try to keep her from having her Korean heritage, she will naturally lean more American, because you're going to speak English.
Right.
You grew up in America. You understand what high school, middle school, college is going to be like for her. And so this whole idea of like even having that conversation of like, man, this happened at school, or like, man, I'm really going through this in college, is going to be a very easy conversation. Like, oh, I get that. We're going to be the only generation that really is going to have this really stark dichotomy and be able to choose what is going to be passed on continually, right?
Yeah.
And when you really think about what happens when people care about the collective, what it ends up being is they're thinking about more than just their life. They're thinking about the next, right? Our parents didn't just not know how to save or not have any financial sense. I think a lot of people, when they look and they're like, oh, I'm going to retire by the time I'm 40 or something like that, there's this idea that financial freedom is like the greatest thing in the world. I think that's the American dream right now. Everyone's like, how do I retire by 40?
Yeah.
Our parents aren't like that. Sure, but now that I'm 30 and they're in their 60s, are thinking about it. But even my dad, once he retires, he wants to continually bring value. And there's this idea of, because it's the collective, I want to continually give value until my life is done.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious what's going to happen when we're in our 50s and all of us who made it are going to retire early, and there's going to be nothing left in the workforce. Like, if you really think about it, our whole lives could be way worse because no one like, I've already been in places where people are in leadership positions because, there's just no one else there. And a lot of the other people who are really, really smart retired. And so there's nobody really mentoring the next. And like, I'm really lucky at the company that I'm at now, Commissions Inc., that I had, a CEO who really cared. I had a VP of product who cared before. But a lot of times you're starting to see younger and younger people, and they're there because, they might have hustled really hard. And the really, really good ones are like, I put my work in, I did all my stuff, I'm out. And they're not even thinking about the next. Yeah. And so, when I really think about where we are and just what we have and what we could inherit, like, that's actually something, I've been thinking about a lot. I've rambled on a bit, but there's a lot of things where people want to choose one or the other. And politically, or even with this, are you Korean or are you American? There's a beauty of being both and fully both. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see that these are the thoughts I'm having, and I think it's great. I think it's really good and I think it's important for us to figure it out because of what you're saying. I think our parents came to this country and they were all fully Korean.
Yeah.
And so the way that they passed down, whatever it is to us, whether it be material things, culture, whatever it is, I think it was all the same. That's why the second generation, like me and you, were pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
We have like different thoughts here and there, but our experiences are very similar. I think that's why second generation Asian Americans like relate to one another so well, because you'll say like it's unintentional, right? Or I think our parents, I fully give my respect to the first generation. I think they did the best that they could, and given the circumstances, I think they did extraordinarily well.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But I think we all have like shared trauma of like the things that we experienced growing up, and I think that's what unites us as a second generation. But I think the third generation, like my daughter, it's gonna be very different. Like I don't like they're gonna be able to I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but like you were saying, they're gonna lose so much of their Korean culture. They're probably gonna be able to relate to like Caucasian, like white people, other people way better than we ever did.
Yeah.
And like I don't know. I'm still thinking through how important is it for us to retain the culture that we grew up with. Yeah. Like the Korean culture. Like several months ago now, I did a podcast with Andy about talking about Hyung culture.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like, I don't want to call it a hierarchy, but it's almost kind of like there are assumed roles of someone older and someone younger. That like the intent is to really like help guide the younger while showing respect to the older, right?
Yeah.
And I've had that conversation with him, and we're on the same wavelength, right? We really want to retain that. But a lot of people I talk to, like around our age, they're like, I don't care for it.
Well, yeah, I think, again, it's because a lot of what lasts past the lifetime requires work. And our generation saw our parents work to the bone, which is why so much of us want to just retire early, because they're like, I don't want to work. But they don't. What I think we don't realize is good work is really valuable. Like, even in the Garden of Eden, there was work.
Yeah.
And like, for me, I know, if I had the chance to retire early, I'd like probably figure out a way to keep working. Like it's a big deal for me. And yeah, like, even with Hyung culture, it's hard because the Hyung normally has to do most of the work.
Yeah.
And the reason why there isn't Hyung culture is because there's probably not a lot of Hyungs who want to do that. And like, even for me, now that I'm, older and I'm like trying to take care of other people, it's really hard. Like, I'm like, hey, like, you want to come to my house? Like, even when I lived at the Battery, it was like, hey, if anybody comes, I said at a church, if anybody comes, like, I'll buy you steak and then we'll like hang out and I'll just, talk to you about life.
Yeah.
And nobody picked me up on it. Not a single person. And so, like, I think there's this idea that it's not valuable anymore, right? Like, the respect isn't there. There's not as many people who want to give of their time like that either. A lot of my youngs, they were like, had young kids when I was like in high school. When I went, like, they made me do a whole bunch of stuff that I never wanted to do. And, but then I learned so much about life because of that. And I was having way deeper conversations than I would have had elsewhere. But it requires sacrifice. And I think we are very, very sacrifice adverse in our generation. It's the littlest amount of work for the most amount of money so that I have the most amount of time to do the things that I want to do, which normally don't benefit the collective.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I was just thinking about this, but that Hyung culture that's so inherent in the Korean culture, I feel like there was an attempt to duplicate that in America through like the big sister, big brother program. Because if you think about it, that's essentially what that culture is, right? And so people saw the value in that. So there, I think objectively there is value in it, right? But I guess you're right. Maybe people just don't want to make the sacrifice to realize that value. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, just to clarify myself too, I did put it out there and nobody came, but I don't think I did everything right either. Like, I'm speaking to myself, like, how can I be a better Hyung, or where are my Hyungs, and am I even respecting them? And like, I think it's a really good thing to think about, because it would be really sad if the next generation didn't get a chance to experience what we experienced.
Yeah, for sure. See, and like this, I think, like going back to kind of our initial topic of is this podcast necessary or not? I think this conversation, there is value in this conversation right here, right? Personally, I think that personally, but then if there's someone out there who doesn't care for the Hyung culture, then do they need to hear this? Is my question. Like, is it like, because I think that there's value in Hyung culture, I'll talk about it, but is it a good thing for them to be listening?
I think diversity of thought is always a good thing. One of the dangers of our world today is we've become so extreme because algorithms or people or whatever, like, we just naturally congregate to the people who think the way we do. And then we just more and more become more and more extreme. And then you have some people who are crypto geniuses and other people who are like, what are you doing with that? You have the GME to the moon people. You got the, I'm super left, or I'm very progressive, I'm really conservative. And what's missing is a whole bunch of moderate people because we're not having diversity of thought. And, it's super cliche because people say it. They're like, oh, we need to have more conversations. Oh, if like we had more empathy and we listened more. But the only way to do that is to have this and for people to listen to this. There might be some people out there who grew up with Hyungs and that was one of the most meaningful things in their life, but they're so busy now in the rat race of life that it's not even in their mind. I'm obviously changing some stuff in my career. And like, for me, moving from this job that I'm in now, in a couple weeks, I'll be gone and starting a new one. I had to think to myself, like, so this is what my mentor told me to think about. He said, what do you want to do at the end of your life? Like, if you actually have a goal, then you can figure out if this actually helps you towards that or not. What kind of person do you want to be? And how will you measure the success of your life? And it's really philosophical, but he's making me think through things that matter. And it zooms me out from the day-to-day 9 to 5, then go have fun, or, like this like rat race that we get put into.
Yeah.
And it's conversations like this, right? That as people are driving somewhere where all of a sudden they might spend a little time introspecting and things might change in their lives. Like, you know what? Like, I want to, I don't know, it might even be familial, right? Like my younger brother who I haven't talked to in forever. Like, I want to be a good young or like but it's important. I think it's important because diversity of thought, hearing things that you normally wouldn't hear elsewhere, even for the listeners, taking the time to sit wherever they are to listen to this, like, I think it's valuable.
Yeah, so I hear that and I'm like, yeah, that's true. That is true. Like, it's good, like diversity of thought, like being able to like take a moment to be introspective. I think those are all good things. But then like I also like so just context. I think what's wrong with like mainstream news media these days is they don't give us facts, they give us opinions. Like it's like instead of fact-based reporting is more narrative-based reporting, right? So they like spoon feed us, this is the way that I think, so I want you to think this way. And I would much rather it be give me the facts and let me digest it and let me come to my own conclusion, right? But I wonder if having conversations like this does that, or if it's more narrative based. Like, I would hate to influence someone to think the way that I think just because it's the way that I think. Like, I want people to just get the facts, just think about things, and come to their own conclusion. But when I see things like Joe Rogan, for example, like he's the number one podcaster in the world, so the scale is a little different here. But like when he says something, it like hits the news. Like the news says, "Oh, Joe Rogan said this," and so many people are influenced by what he said. Like there was a controversy recently where he said, if you're 21 and you're healthy, you probably don't need to get the vaccine. Right, the COVID vaccine, you're gonna be fine as long as you take care of yourself and take like vitamins and things like that. And then he had to like be like, after the fact, after the backlash, he had to apologize and say, "Why are you guys listening to me about this? I'm not like a doctor. All I know is what I see." Right. So even in these conversations, like there is a worry in me that somehow I'm influencing someone in an unintended way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Dude, So you've got me thinking like layers deep now. I wonder if
I like it.
I wonder if the next generation is like, I wonder how marketing and all that stuff's going to work, because you're right. Like a lot of stuff is narrative based, even brands, right? A lot of brands, it used to be like, we make the best shoes. And now it's like, we care about your dreams. Right. And it's, but at a certain point, it's going to lose its luster because everything is so puffed up that it's going to be really hard to find genuine, authentic stuff that's not fluffed up.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I feel like these are some of the most real conversations I'm having, right? This is a real conversation. None of this, I don't have notes. I don't have anything. Like, I'm literally just talking.
Yeah.
But I don't know if people will even do this anymore. Yeah. It's a lot of small, like we might have even lost our ability to have deep and meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
And, if this is a place and a forum to where people will actually think a little bit more and they'll talk to you, dude, even if it's just for the people behind the mic, it's going to be an amazing thing. But I totally get what you're saying. Like, what happened to the just Walter Cronkite, facts, and that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
it's, I've been, so one news outlet that I really enjoy watching and listening to is, I don't know, have you heard of Rising?
No.
With Cristobal and Sager and Jetty. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. So they used to be part of the channel called The Hill on YouTube. And the concept of their news show is Sagar is a conservative guy and Crystal she's a more liberal person. So like the way that they present the stories is much more moderate because she has her opinions as a liberal, he has his opinions as a conservative. They have their own channel now called Breaking Points on YouTube, and I feel like because there's someone literally sitting right next to them to like check them if they go too deep into their own narrative. Like I feel like it's balanced and like it's really reasonable, like the way that they talk about things. So I find a lot of value in being moderate and with the diversity of thought like you were talking about. So I hope that this podcast can provide something similar. Not on a political level like they do, but just in everyday life, like the things that we encounter every day. Like I think approaching things just as Asian Americans from multiple perspectives instead of just one that's like fed to us by MSNBC or Fox or whatever like it may be. I see the value in that, and I think you're right. I think there is value even for me, definitely as a person talking behind the mic. So that's good. It's things. See, this is why I said let's just go for it. Let's just record without like discussing much about it, because I think there is something about processing our thoughts behind the mic like this that I think helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm hoping this can be a way for people to model processing as well. I think there are people who have a lot of thoughts, but don't have the avenue to process them. So guys, just start a podcast and get your friends to come over and record. This is really good. So what was that? What was the thing that we said we were going to discuss? We had one topic.
I forget.
You forget? Dang it.
Yeah, I don't remember. I thought it was, is this podcast valuable?
Well, so what you think? Is there any way to increase the valuability? Is that a word?
The value
of this podcast, you think? Given that there's value for people talking on the mic, for some people listening. Like, do you think there's anything we can do to increase the value of this podcast?
Honestly, I think you've been doing a really great job. As I think off the cuff right now, I think so for me in my discipline of work, I'm in product. One of the things that's really important is knowing your customer or knowing your consumer. So, I think one of the things that might be really valuable or be able to increase the value is understand who's listening and understand what they find valuable. I know you have, I think it was like a Twitter handle, an email, stuff like that. I mean, I'd be really curious as to what people's feedback is, right?
Yeah, that's one thing. I don't get much feedback.
Yeah, I bet so, because podcasts are normally not listened to in a forum to where you're immediately able to give feedback, or you like something like halfway through the podcast and by the time you got to the end, you probably like forgot what you were thinking or things like that. But I don't know.
Really, the only feedback I get, and actually that's not true. I have some really great listeners who are very encouraging. But like with most things, like most the reviews on Yelp is when people have bad experiences.
Right.
So, most of the feedback. No, now that I'm thinking about it, I do get a lot of, hey, this topic was really good. I guess the feedback that stick in my mind the most is the negative feedback. Like, I didn't agree with what you said, which is totally fine. I love it when people don't agree with me, because that gives me a way to understand.
It's diversity of thought.
Yeah. So you know what? That is something I should do a better job of, is asking people for feedback. So guys, if you have any feedback on this podcast or this episode in particular or any past episodes, please please feel free to let me know in any of the different avenues that you want.
Yeah. And I mean, like, encouragement is really good, and feedback for like, hey, I don't agree with that. It's really good. But I think one thing that would be really great for the listeners to do, and maybe I'm overstepping my bounds, but like, I hope they hear this. Like, what would you hope that people heard, or what do you think would be really valuable? That might be a really good thing to get in. And then if people are like, oh, I don't know what to do with my finances, then like, I'll go find someone who's really good with that, and I hope everyone gets to hear this. Or, I'm like going through like home buying, and I have no idea how any of this stuff works, or political views. I don't even understand what left or right or progressive, liberal, conservative. I don't even know what any of that means. Like, well, I hope someone hears this. Like, this is some of that stuff. Or what do you just hope people would hear? Like, here's an Asian story. Here's someone who's amazing, and I wish more people knew about them. Yeah, I feel like listener-driven content is also pretty amazing.
Yes, absolutely. And even if I want people to hear my story, my as in your story, please feel to reach out. I love having conversations like this. There was a friend of mine, so I forget which episode it was, several episodes ago, Lauren Song. I knew her in high school, and she found out about the podcast. She reached out saying like, I going through this thing with my dad, I would love to share with your listeners. And it was a great episode.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah, you don't even need that connection with me. I'm sure she felt more comfortable because like we were friends in high school. But even if I don't know you, yeah. I mean, actually, there was one person, Hyun. I had never met him before. But we're in the same circles. Like, we know people, we know mutual friends. But he and I never like talked. But he heard the podcast and he's like, hey, like, I would love to have dinner with you. So I met him up at a Chipotle, and we had a really good conversation. And he even ended up being on the podcast. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, kind of thinking back, like, the thing that I think really clouded everything in terms of trying to find clarity around the purpose and goal of this podcast is just, everything happening socially, right?
Yeah.
And so, thinking about it, really just having conversations, I think there's really a lot of value in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because case in point, I'm finding a lot of value in having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
this is great.
Yeah. That's a really good point. So, guys, open invite for anybody who has any ideas for topics, or anybody who wants to be on the podcast. If you don't feel comfortable coming to my house, you can do it through Zoom. And, if you don't live close to here, you can also do it through Zoom. So, yeah, please let me know. What's going on with you, Jonathan, in your life? You mentioned a few things.
Yeah.
Kind of in passing. You're moving jobs.
Yeah. So, actually, I hope you hear this. So I was at a company for 4 years. Still there right now. I'll be there for a couple more weeks before I move on to the next job. But for anybody who is changing careers, starting a new career, or at an entry-level job, there was a book a long time ago that I read, Seth Godin's Linchpin. It's a very entry-level job, or entry-level book. Simon Sinek's like Leaders Eat Last or something like that would also be good if you've maybe been in working a little longer. But I came into this company at the bottom rung of what I do. So I was just a product manager, and I was able to get to senior and director, and really did a lot within the 4 years that I was there. And I'm moving on to a leadership role at the next company for church management systems. But the thing that I hope you hear is anybody who is starting a new career, changing careers, or things like that, what you put in is what you get out. And even when you're going to look for jobs or look for places to go, no matter what it is that you do, always go the extra mile and challenge yourself. Go somewhere where you can really grow, which means maybe more responsibility, maybe less pay. Because if you get more pay, you're probably at a bigger corporation, meaning you have less responsibility. Sometimes the best thing to do is go into a small business where, yeah, you might have to wear a ton of hats and do a whole bunch of things, but you'll probably grow the most. And again, some people this is going to make total sense, and some people you're going to be in professions where you need a master's degree and then you go in and then like you just execute what you learned. But a lot of people, especially in like the business world or entry level jobs or people changing careers and things like that, this has been the single greatest thing that could have happened to me. 4 years at Commissions Inc., learning, growing, taking on way more than what I needed to do, building the right relationships, going way above and beyond. I did work for things that were above my pay grade on purpose. And then because I did the work first, the title came. A lot of times people want the title and then I'll try that work. Just go and do the work. Like if you know you want to be a VP, go figure out how you can do VP kind of work. Like I talked to my CEO and said like, hey, how can I sit in on more, I don't know, merger acquisition conversations? Like how do I want to learn more of the business side. Like show me whenever you're making business plans. And you'll find out pretty quickly that a lot of people, especially in leadership, they want hungry people. And so my quick 2 cents for anybody who's thinking about that, I hope you really hear this. Like put in the extra work. Invest into yourself. If you don't know what you want, you don't know where you want to be, the business will just take what they want from you, right? They'll just fit you where they need to fit you. But if you have an idea like, oh, I want to be in leadership, or I really want to get into product, or I know a lot of people who go into support, then tech support because they want to be a developer. Like just start coding your own stuff. Like there's stuff on YouTube. Go talk to developers in your company and say like, hey, how can I do a little thing here, or a little thing there, or hey, take a look at what I did. Can you just, QA this for me real quick? What would you do to make this better? Those little things of doing things before the title is there, I think has really, really shifted my career a ton, and it's one of the biggest changes right now.
That's great. Wow. That's really good advice. Because that's something, well, me, I don't know. Again, this is going back to why this podcast exists. There are people who like they really need to focus on their career. There are people who I focus on everything outside of my career.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely.
But I do think though, early on in my career, because I was hungry, like you were talking about, I always wanted to kind of get to the next level. I wanted to do the next thing. Because I had that drive early on, I have flexibility to have shifted away from it now.
Yep.
Now that I'm a father and, husband, all that. Yeah. And I think it's like a cyclical thing. Like there are seasons of life where I'm going to be really driven to excel and be excellent in my work. But then if that doesn't give me enough bandwidth in my home life, then like I can kind of dial back and forth. But the idea of, doing the work before the given title, I think applies to a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Just not just the career, like even in actually let me okay, well, before I get to that. So the desire, showing that you have that desire, I think really does make people look at you a different way, right? And even like the beginning of your career, it was, you weren't even like, you didn't study it in school?
Nope. I was a biology major. Luckily, I had started business at school, but I went to Australia for a year to do music. And when I came back, I was worship director at 4 Points. Had no reason to be at any business. Went in, did support, then did like onboarding, webinars, did sales for like maybe a day or two. And then I eventually found product. And once I found it, because I knew what I wanted to do, I was really driven. And I think that's our problem, right? We're so blessed that we have so many options. We don't know what we want to do, so we won't put anything on the line to get what we want. Yeah, but at the same time, I think you're right too. There are seasons of life where the most important thing is to be at home, or to be a dad, or to be a husband, or focus at church, or focus, with maybe 동생s, because you're trying to, do young life.
Yeah, but I think to be positioned well to be a good young or be a good dad or like all that, like you have to build something. Like you have to have something to stand on to say, hey,
I agree with that.
Right. I think it's the whole like ant and the grasshopper story.
Yeah.
Is that an American story, or is that just Korean, or is that global?
Is it in the Bible?
No.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't know.
So the story is, like there's a grasshopper that just chills all winter or all fall, all summer or something.
Yeah, because there's enough food.
Yeah, but then the ants are like gathering. Once winter comes, the grasshopper's like, "Yo, I have no food. I'm gonna die." But the ants are like, "Well, you should have built up." I mean, I think the good ending is like the ants say, "Okay, come in. Like we'll share this food with you." But the ants wouldn't be able to survive through the winter if they didn't have something that they built. And I will say, like there were times in my career where I was like, oh, this is the worst. I just want to give up. I want to quit, go do something easier. But because I pushed through and I grinded and I positioned myself in a place where I can kind of, like when the work requires it, I'll put in my all. But then there are moments where I can, take a breather. Yeah. And I think it's because, I positioned myself well to do that. So, like even as a hyung, like if you're not positioned well to give hyung advice and to be a good hyung to your dongsengs, then you're not going to be an effective hyung. Right?
Yep. So true statement.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice for just all aspects of life. The one thought that kind of came to mind that I think can be controversial is, let's say you apply that to like romantic relationships, right? So like you find someone who you want to date. Is it good to just behave as if you are their boyfriend because you want to become their boyfriend?
So I don't think you should do that, but I do think it could be effective for you to be introspective, to prepare yourself for that, right? So not treating the girl as if she's already your girlfriend, but are you in a position and are you in a life stage, or are you in a thought, like a mind space, head space, to where you could be sacrificial? Like, can you start working on that now? Oh, I really want to get married. Well, you're not going to put a ring on somebody and all of a sudden be a great husband. It's going to be the cumulative effect of who you have been sowing all this time. If you've been sowing short temper, just because you bought a ring, that's not going to go away. Yeah. And so what kind of father do you want to be? A patient father or a short-tempered father? Well, at our age now, our habits are actually what's going to show up. It's the cumulative effect of every day of life, the choices that we make, right? And so just because I want to be a father or something, I'm not going to like just go pretend I'm somebody else's father or something. But I can mentally start saying like, man, I want to be an encouraging father as opposed to nitpicking at every mistake that someone makes. Well, you better start that now, because just because a kid pops out, your mentality isn't just going to change overnight. It might for some people. It might. It really might, right? But for the most part, our actual habits, like temper, like if you're an encouraging, uplifting person versus not, all that kind of stuff, like those are the cumulative effects of your decisions over life. Yeah. And you can choose to invest into that now and do a lot of the heavy lifting now. And if you do the heavy lifting now, then by the time you are married or you do have a kid, you might actually like have the blessing of not having as much strife as you might have had and stuff like that. Yeah. And so I do think it still applies, just not how you treat others. It's all really, all of this is all, how are you positioning yourself? How are you doing the work? How are you being personally responsible for whatever work, family, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and yeah, hearing you talk about that, that does put a better picture in my head. Like, just to take that example of like, if there's a girl you want to date, it's not about like, oh, I'm gonna approach her and just automatically say, hey, you're my girlfriend, and just start behaving that way. But yeah, the way that you think about her, right? Like, even if you're not dating her, if are you ready to think about, all the sacrifices that you would have to make
Right.
as a boyfriend, or all the things that all the extra mile steps that you'll take to impress her and things like that. Are you in a place even to be able to do that?
Right.
Even fatherhood is a good example. I think for me, nothing changed when Avery was born. Like, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, like, I loved her. Like, when I saw her, it was amazing. But in terms of the way that I behave, like the type of person I was, nothing changed, right?
Yeah.
And so, and for my wife as well. Like, I think Shirley, like, she was already kind of a mom before she became a mom. And I think that might be why for us it was like we had a really easy pregnancy with the first one. We had a really easy pregnancy, easy birth, and just even like the first however many like months of her life, it was all really kind of spectacularly easy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was luck, admittedly. I think Aisley is just a really good baby, but I think some of it had to do with the fact that like Shirley was so well prepared to take on the role of motherhood.
Yeah.
And I think even me too. Like, I went into it like thinking I'm gonna be making sacrifices. Like,
right.
So many sacrifices. Let's just expect that as a norm. And
right.
then, like, when it happens, like, just deal with it. Like, don't linger on the things of like, oh, I've missed out on this, I missed out on that. Like, so like having myself prepared that in that way mentally, I think really helped.
Yeah.
And again, I think that applies to so many different situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it applies to every aspect of life, right? It's a personal introspection thing. Yeah. Like, why are you doing the things that you're doing? And like, it goes back to the 3 questions that my mentor asked, and it's like really fresh in my head because I was lucky enough to have multiple offers or 2, and thinking between the 2 of which one to accept, it all came down back to that. More than compensation or benefits or things like that, it came down to who do I want to be, what kind of person do I want to be, like what do I want to do, what kind of person do I want to be, and how will I measure the success of my life. And when I really thought about how am I going to measure the success of my life, the first thing that came to my mind was my family and my faith, right? Very, very like tied together. And my work is an extension of that. But I think understanding those things helps you zoom out. And it prepares you for stages of life, changes to come, makes you much more of a resilient person. Makes you a much more grounded person. And so, yeah, I hope you guys hear that because that's stuff I wish people told me in my early 20s. In my early 20s, I was chasing everything that I could do to figure out how to retire early. I just, like, my whole idea of work has completely shifted. But...
So what were those 3 questions again?
What do you want to do? So this was in career. My mentor told me to think about it in the view of career. What do you want to do? So if you know what you want to do at the end of the road, then you can decide where you're getting the right experiences as opposed to maybe where you can make the most money. It's, if you want to be a CEO or a CPO, you get into the C-suite, it's better for you to take leadership opportunities than it is for you to make more money being an individual contributor.
Right.
Whereas, if your goal is to retire early, then it probably makes more sense just to go wherever you can make the most money or something like that with the best benefits. So understanding where you want to be helps you decide, is this in alignment with that or not? So what do you want to do in your life? Number 2 was what kind of person do you want to be? So for me, no matter where I go, I want to be the type of person that brings value to people and raises people to their potential. That's the value. That's the kind of person I want to be. I want to encourage people, instill faith, and really allow them to be the best versions of themselves. And then 3, how will you measure the success of your life? And for me, it's going to be the people that I bring up, can they bring other people up? It's really easy to teach learners. It's really hard to teach teachers. And so something my mentor used to always say, you can tell the success of your life, of how you raised your children, by your grandchildren. If your children can actually teach their children, then you did a really good job, because they learned how to teach the stuff. Our whole education system is not that. It's not teach to teach, you know. It's teach to learn. Like, I'm going to get it right on the test, I'll forget it. But in life, I think it's really different. And so, those are the 3 questions. Those are kind of what I've thought through over the past month or so. But yeah, I think it's really important to zoom out. I think that's a really good special power to have. Like, exercise that muscle. Zoom out. Look at your life. It's way faster than you think. Can't believe we're 32, 33 already. It's like a third of our life if we make it to 100. Like, that's crazy. But, you know, it's really easy to be so worried about this life stage, so worried about this week, so worried about this work day, and miss out that, man, like, we're so blessed to be in the situation we're in, and these are the things that really matter.
That's really good. I'm thinking about those 3 questions in regard to this podcast. I think it applies really well. Yeah, and I think that does help me think more clearly about the kind of goal of this podcast and like where I want to see it go, and the question of, does it have value? Like, it helps me think about that a lot. By the way, I think 33. I think we're maybe at a quarter of our
Dude,
life.
I hope so.
I think
that'd be awesome.
As
long as we're like healthy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be struggling at.
I think when we're 70, it's going to look like our grandparents when they were like 40, 50. I think so.
I hope so. I hope so.
We'll see. But yeah, thank you so much for this off the cuff podcast.
Yeah,
this was fun. Great. It was really good. It was really good.
This was fun.
Any last thoughts before we close?
Yeah, David said it before. Go send stuff to his email. Whatever. What's your email?
Yeah, it's IHTHT@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's like, contribute and be a contributor, not just a spectator. And I said a whole bunch of stuff at the end, so all that stuff.
Yeah, and on Instagram, I know most people are on Instagram. Just search "I hope they hear this," all one word, and you can send me feedback via that too. So yeah, Jonathan, once again, thank you so much for this. This is great because, I wasn't even expecting to get an extra episode, but it was like really good. And I feel like you're one of the few people that can be really honest about, like the, is my podcast even worth doing? Like, that's a question that I can't really honestly discuss with many people, but you're one of the few that I can talk to.
Thank you.
And I can expect you to really think about it and then give, meaningful feedback to it. So, I mean, you guys listening, you guys saw it all play out. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, please, I want to connect. I want to connect with you guys and connect with this community of people who are listening. So yeah, please reach out and we'll talk to you guys next time.